Reality Al-Mahdi, this channel is spreads light. Enjoy the blessed words of the well-guided Imam here on Reality Al-Mahdi.
Having this mentality is forgetting the way of life of the Prophet. They were poor, but Ali was always first to the battlefield. They kept being poor, but Fatimah was always patient, and everyone knew that she was her father's confidant. She used to tell him everything. But whenever she was on the verge of telling him, she remembered the words of her husband. Until one day, she decided to tell the Prophet, because that was his father, and Ali was a person with dignity, and she was thinking that her husband didn't want help coming from the Prophet. But on that day she was decided, as she told Ali that she wanted to see her father. Ali replied, I know why you want to see him, but the situation reached a certain level, and you were in someone else's hand. Therefore, you have the right to speak about your situation. He gave her the authorization. She went and saw the Prophet sitting in the middle of the house. She entered and shook her father's hand. Fatima was someone who knew how to speak. And it was a period when Islam was gaining attraction, and the Prophet had wealth in his house. If this was during our time, the woman would come to her father and say, give us some of your money, we are tired. She would say this as she would be talking to her father. Give us your money, we are tired. We will take a check or even the whole account. But Fatima came and shook her father's hand. The Prophet told her, you walked under this intense heat. She answered, yes. This wish of mine can only be granted under such conditions. Allah wahyued the Prophet about the situation and the reason for her visit. However, the Prophet was listening to see which language she would be using. Fatima extended her hand and told the Prophet to pray for them. She didn't go to him for money, but she came over so that the Prophet would pray for them. The Prophet held her hand for a while and said, why are you asking me this question when you should have asked me for lunch or dinner for you and your husband, instead of saying that the reason for your visit is not because of expenses, but it's because of a need for prayers, and you should have asked me for money? Fatima answered, your prayer is far more powerful than money. Expenses are in between breakfast and dinner. As for your prayer, it will apply until the end of time. The Prophet then tells her to extend her hand, and she does so. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam recited a Fatiha for her that's never been done, never been recited. Because the awliya or even the prophets, let alone Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, can have a closer relationship with God until Allah gives them a total of 70 Fatihatul Kitab, each starting from Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim to Wala Dalin Amin. But the degrees are different. Many have praised their guide after the latter has only recited for them half of a Fatiha, as they choose a degree of Fatiha for certain individuals. The Prophet chose a Fatiha he never learned for anyone and recited it for Sayyidatuna Fatimah. When she stood up, the Prophet held her hand and told her, you will give birth to 2 sons who will have descendants who in turn will be followed by every man of God. And until now this statement is still valid because the saint comes from this family, having as a descendant Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, who bought the Tariqa Qadiriyya. Hassan comes from this family, having as descendant Mawlana Shaykh Ahmad Tijani, who bought the Tariqa Tijaniya. All saints followed these 2 paths. This was the prayer of the Prophet, and Fatima said to the Prophet that his prayer will remain until the end of time. Therefore, the wish came true. And if the Prophet had given her on that day, then the problem would have been solved. But he recited for her a Fatihatul Kitab and let her know that she will have sons who will have grandchildren, and every man of God will follow behind them.
The revolution of lights with the one and only Imam al-Mahdi al-Muntazar.